Welcome to Jenny Hodgson. She's the director of the Global Fund for Community Foundation, and she's here for a visiting field of the project of Periferiacapitale, sustained by the Foundation Charlemagne. And what about your intervention all around the world, your activities since 2006 to sustain the community philanthropy?
Sure, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the welcome. So the Global Fund for Community Foundations has, over a number of years, been building up a network of organisations around the world that we would say are thinking differently about how development is done. The framing that we use is one around community philanthropy or community-based philanthropy, and that means people together in one way or another in a place or connected by an issue or an identity. So community can mean many different things, not just a place. Starting to think about the resources that they have in their communities. And that means money, yes, but also the other kind of intangible resources that are so important to effective development. So relationships, trust, knowledge of the community, connections, and to start thinking about actually how do you drive development from that perspective. I think in many parts of the world, particularly where international development aid has played a big role, and often in many parts of the world that doesn't have development aid but has big government, has had a history, a lot of development work has been very top-down, directed from above, short-term, expecting things to happen quickly and in very measurable ways. And in fact, the reality is that we know development work doesn't happen like that. It's a slow process. It's about people's mindsets, how they think about themselves, the extent to which they feel confident, that they have agency, and so on. And so in our work, we've built up a network of around 200 organizations in 70 countries who would describe themselves as community foundations, community-based foundations, socio-environmental funds, so some of them work on particular issues, women's funds, grassroots grant makers, and so on. And it's a wonderful, diverse mix of organizations. They're all different from each other. But what brings them together is three different aspects of the work that they would agree on, I think. One is that this work is about assets. It's about the richness that lives in communities, and often external resources somehow encourage people to think that they don't have anything in their communities, that they're starting from a deficit point of view. So the idea that resources already exist and that when people contribute their own resources, it changes the power dynamic. They feel like they have a stake, they have a voice, they're entitled to be heard. So the asset piece is really very important. Secondly, most of the organizations we work with are themselves grant makers. So they're not trying to grow themselves and their staff to deliver lots of projects. They are building a bridge between community-based, themselves and community-based groups. So they're building community action in the communities that they work with. And that element of that being about building agency or capacity to do things for themselves, just organizing of people. And the third really is the currency of trust, that actually what they really are doing is about building trust, bonds, social capital between members of the community, across different communities or different parts of the community, and importantly, how that trust can also be a way, or that social capital can be a way to start organizing communities so they can make demands of others, whether that's local government or other stakeholders that they might not normally feel like they have an entitlement to engage. So that's been how we've organized our work. It's been quite organic. We provide some small funding, but actually what we really provide is the network, is to connect somebody in Kenya with somebody in Mexico, to connect somebody in Mexico with somebody in Ukraine who feel like they're telling a different kind of a story. The other way that we've organized our work has been to explicitly use the word power. So we organize under the hashtag Shift the Power, that often development work is very polite work. Yeah. It's about money, it's about contracts, it's about politeness, it's about partnership. Yeah. But often that's not the reality. There are power dynamics from the outside to the local, within the local. So I think many of our partners are very concerned about managing power dynamics within their own communities. Yeah. And that if you don't name power as something explicit, then it easily gets overlooked and people are surprised that things don't actually work.
And which are the main lessons you have to bring, or maybe you learn from the visits of the project of Periferiacapitale, and some indications, comments, suggestions for the social organization as well as for the institution? In terms of power, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's been a fascinating few days visiting these organisations, and so many of their stories are familiar to me. It could be something one of our partners is telling us in another part of the world. The role of organisations really working at the edges, not with resources initially, but with people, and actually starting to create the conditions in which trust can be built, actions can happen. And I think this can be very lonely work and very dispiriting work unless you feel like you're supported. I think one of the things that we've learned in recent years is the opportunity that this networked world now allows us, that actually it's possible to connect with others in other parts of the world. And actually what these organisations themselves are doing is building networked power. They're building connections between people, among people, to feel part of something bigger. And if we can start to do that at a global level, we start to kind of tap this extraordinary innovation, this sort of networked power of people thinking and working differently, not waiting for things to happen to them, but actually working from where they are. So, I mean, it struck me that there are huge opportunities to join up with some of the work that partners in our network are doing all around the world, where we would talk about it of new ways of deciding and doing, that's what we need. We need new institutional forms. We need to start thinking about institutions that serve people, not institutions that then sort of don't know what their role is to play exactly. Yeah. So how do we really tap these new energies where people are consciously making decisions to work in different ways, that they know what doesn't work, and that if you can start to organise the makers of these new systems, that's an extraordinary power. I think what we've also learned is that there's no blueprint, there's no expert. The experts are the people who are doing the work. Mm-hmm. And what struck me over the course of the last few days is how comfortable many of the people I've met would feel in a meeting of our partners, where the starting point is really around, how do we unlock potential in the community? How do we build a sort of connection, a strength, a confidence within communities so that they can engage with each other in effective ways, organise their collective power and their resources, but also translate that into a way that can claim and articulate rights with those in public office, for example. We know that government structures are not, they're blunt instruments often. They don't have the ability to do the relational, the human piece of this. And so that idea that we need to be able to mix different kinds of resources, so whether it's private philanthropy, community philanthropy, taxpayers' money, it's the blend of all of these that weave new kinds of trust and possibilities, and that one of those on its own can only do so much, but those mixed up together can be enormously powerful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and welcome again here in the room.
Thank you.